Hey, Bridge family, thank you so much for tuning in. I am so excited for this. That exciting would be an understatement. So I have the honor, the pleasure of introducing to you Brock Morgan. Brock is officially going to be our Associate Pastor of Student Ministries. We're doing things a little bit different here in that the Morgan family currently lives in Washington, D.C., so that has changed a little bit of the process in terms of him being able to interact with people. It just so happened that they were out here on vacation already, and so we were able to have an in-person visit through that. So what I want to do here is I just want to introduce you guys to Brock. That way you can hear from him, learn about him, his background, his history, his passions, his giftings. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I'll let Brock in. So Brock, can you just first introduce yourself to our church, tell us about your family and all that kind of fun personal stuff?
Yeah, so man, we're so excited to be a part of the Bridge, and just feel like God has just been orchestrating this thing. Mark and I have been talking for a couple of months, and then being able to be here in person, even in the midst of COVID, is awesome. Let's see, I was born in Seattle, and my parents live in Oregon. My older sister lives in Oregon. My younger sister, her family live here, just right down the road, actually. And so it feels for us like coming home. All my family's on the West Coast, and but I've been married for 25 years this past May. Which is amazing.
Quarter of a century.
I know. My wife's name is Kelsey. We have a daughter who is 23. She just graduated from Lee University in Tennessee with a film degree, and is excited to be out here in LA with us as well. Her name is Danson. And dude, we're just thrilled.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm pumped too. So could you tell us maybe just like all the fun things? So what are like hobbies, passions?
Okay.
If you had a weekend,
Okay.
a completely open weekend, the weather's good,
Okay.
money's not an issue, what are you doing?
Money's not an issue.
There you go.
Well, I like my family. We're active, so we'd be outside. We love the water. I do surf.
Okay.
There is no good surfing in Washington D.C.
So this is a game changer.
So it's just so I got to come back.
45 minutes from here,
Yeah.
you're at the beach.
Yeah, my family lived for about 15, 20 years here in Southern California, and so we would regularly go surfing. Me and my friends. I skateboard. I played college basketball. We love to play tennis. We played golf. So we like getting outside, being active, and so those are some of our hobbies. I love to read. I'm an avid reader, and just hanging out with my wife and daughter, whatever we're doing. We love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. We hope that you will take advantage of the Southern California weather.
Mm-hmm.
So let's zero in a little bit here now towards ministry. So for those of you who don't know, he probably won't say it, so because he's humble and down to earth, but Brock is, you have authored, I think, 15 books, national youth speaker. So Brock is the man in all things youth ministry. So why don't you, I think it'd be great, just some of the books you've written, and just maybe your background in youth ministry, because you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And you got many more years ahead of you.
Man, I do love youth ministry. It's my heart. I started in Glendale, here in California, and did youth ministry there. We did youth ministry in Long Beach. We did ministry in San Diego. We did ministry in Sacramento. That's over about a 20-year period. And in the midst of that, opportunities, doors, God just started opening up doors, first with speaking, and then I was speaking at an event, and I got off the stage, and I was talking about kind of the secret world of teenage guys in this seminar. And I got off the stage in a publishing company, publishing house by the name of Group Publishing, was like, hey, we would love if you'd write a book.
Wow.
So my first book was called Parents' Guide to Teenage Guys. and it's all about the world of teenage boys.
That's a scary world right there.
So, and then after that book, I wrote a book. I was doing youth ministry at that time in New England, just outside of Manhattan, in New York, outside of New York City, and so it was kind of the hotbed of post-Christianity at that time. So I wrote, my second book was called Youth Ministry in a Post-Christian World. And then we've written a bunch of stuff in between. My most recent book is a book for teenagers. I'm so pumped about it. It just came out this year, and it's called A Beautiful Rebellion. And it's all about calling kids into this movement.
Yes.
And dude, kids are hardwired for rebellion.
Yes.
And so if you look at any great revival, any movement, man, kids are at the heart of this stuff. Maybe the leaders are adults,
right,
but kids are at the heart of seeing God's kingdom, representing God's kingdom, and extending it everywhere they go.
It's so good.
And so that's what that book is about.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And Brock, I think that probably even leads maybe to some other stuff of what are your values, your vision for youth groups, and then obviously, now with At the Bridge, but just what are the things that you really focus in on?
Yeah.
Like your maybe non-negotiables of, man, this is what a youth group in 2020 and beyond needs here in America.
Yeah, I would say maybe three things initially. It is a nuanced question, it's a big question, but maybe quickly just three things. And it's the heart of all of the gospel, it's the heart of humanity, and that's relationships. So it starts and ends with relationships. Create an environment where students can get to know each other. I love youth group being kind of the great cultural reversal. Kids go to school and they're like, no one at my school loves Jesus, or no one's actually following God, and they come to youth group and they hear their peers talking about what God is doing in their life. It's this great, oh, here's a whole other world. And so it's about relationships with each other. It's about godly, caring adults being in the lives of students. And all of this pointing them to the God who is desperate to be in relationship with them. So it starts with relationships. And then kind of the two other things I would say is the days of shallow youth ministry are behind us. And so it's got to be more intellectual, not boring, but it's got to make sense. We've got to show kids today that the faith actually is reasonable. It has intellectual teeth. It's not, you don't have to check your brain at the door.
Absolutely.
To enter into a faith relationship with Jesus. And so it's got to be deeply intellectual. And then it's got to have what you actually spoke about in the service this morning. If you missed it, go online, about the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
There's got to be high intellect and high spirit.
Yes.
So deeply relational, deeply intellectual, deeply connected to God's Spirit.
Wow. That's like the recipe for revival.
That's the recipe for revival.
Which is what we want.
That's what we want.
I mean, one of the things Brock and I, is we've just been talking for a couple months. Obviously, initially, lots of FaceTime. But I think we clicked right away over a lot of things. And probably the most important thing, I think, is both of us have a passion. We want revival.
That's right.
Like, we aren't here. Brock is not taking this job just to let's just grow the youth group. No, it's like he wants to see kids, students, families lead, as your book says, a rebellion, a movement for the kingdom of God.
That's right.
And I just know for you, that's what wakes you up in the morning.
That gets me up, man.
And to me, that's where it's at.
Yeah. And I'm so excited about the possibility of what is even happening in Chino and the surrounding areas, and how people are moving here. And God has strategically placed this church for such a time as this. And I just feel fortunate and blessed that God's called us to partner and to join what He's doing here in Chino. I'm excited.
Yeah. And that even spills over into quite a few other things. One of the things that Brock is going to be initially doing is some areas of outreach. And one of the things that we found out through us talking, and we didn't know beforehand,
Right.
total God thing, is that actually him and his wife have a huge Alpha background.
Right.
And so they did Alpha Youth. That you guys are on the board, I believe, for Alpha Youth
US. Yeah.
and so there is a huge, again, cultural locking there for us of a heart for the non-Christian, for the unchurched, the post-church, whatever you want to call them. But again, to see people who don't follow Jesus, who have been jaded by the church,
Yeah.
come into a fresh encounter with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be another area that Brock's just going to be leaning into as we kind of get started here. And I don't know anything.
Yeah, well, years ago, I was doing research on movements, little movements that got little kind of God explosions around the world. And everywhere I looked, I kept seeing this thing, Alpha, a part of it. I'm like, what in the world is Alpha? And then I read about it and found out about it and how it was just this really amazing. It was started by this church in London. And it's just this conversation that people are invited into, and somehow God is using these conversations to slowly move them into relationship with Him. And so then we started, I want to run an Alpha thing for my community. So then we started doing that, and in the midst of all of that, Alpha contacted my wife and I and said, would you be on the board? And we were like, holy cow, are you kidding me? Yes, slam dunk. And so we're so excited that when we found out you guys were doing Alpha, because, and you guys, your family, have deep roots and connections with Alpha. And so we're excited.
That's awesome. Last thing that kind of goes together here. So another thing that Brock's going to be doing is he has a huge heart and a vision of believing that typically in churches, a youth pastor and the youth ministry is kind of siloed.
Yeah.
And so him and I, nope, we don't want that. And so one of his things where we try to integrate everything as a multi-generational and intergenerational church is you're going to see Brock preaching a lot, and which I am super thrilled for. And here's why. Brock is an amazing communicator, a passionate storyteller. And so could you just maybe just give a minute or two of just that gifting and calling of you as a communicator, as a preacher? What excites you about that? What's a little bit of maybe your style, if you will? That way people can just also be able to recognize that gifting and that side of you as well.
Okay.
I just put him on the spot on this one. None of this is rehearsed.
I mean, the communication piece, again, that was just kind of God. I just wanted to communicate initially God's heart with students and do it in a way that intellectually makes sense. I love kids who maybe are skeptics initially or have questions. Even like our current church that we recently were ministering in, the elementary department would bring their thinking kids to me.
Wow.
Hey, can you just sit down and talk with kids? So the idea of just communicating in a way that children, kids, and adults can resonate with is I just feel I just feel this passion and longing to communicate in a way that they can understand it and get it. So I try to be intellectually relevant, and then also, but not stale.
Absolutely.
Also deliver the heart of God, and so I'm excited to be a part of the team. I'm excited. I've loved listening to you and your wife and others share online, and so I'm pumped to join to be a part of it, to join it.
Yeah, and there's so much more to that. There's one thing that became evident to me in the last couple weeks of this is just the hand of God. I mean, like providential, sovereign hand of God of just orchestrating this thing together.
We feel that too.
To be honest with you, because it actually didn't make rational sense in the perspective of Brock's been a part of very large, influential churches, and the bridge is not there yet. We hope to grow. But man, I just think of the word kairos in such a time as this, and it just feels right.
It does. It just feels right.
So we're excited. We will be sending more information out about Brock and his family. Just so you guys know, obviously they're moving across the country from DC, so it's going to take them a couple weeks to do that. Right now, we're kind of looking at maybe a start date sometime in August. So not too far from now, but it won't be in the next couple weeks. And so we will be giving more information about that. We just wanted to give you guys a video kind of introduction of him. That way you can get to know who he is. Obviously, you can go on Amazon, look at his books, YouTube him, all that kind of good stuff. Why don't we end with this? This was a story that really resonated with me that you shared on Tuesday, actually about 5 days ago. And I think it'd be great to end with this because I think there's a vision here. Could you share the story of at your previous church how the youth ended up leading and modeling prayer?
Yeah.
This just really stood out to me. I think it'd be a great thing to end on in terms of a vision and a passion.
Yeah. So we moved to Washington, D.C. 5 years ago and started ministering at this church. And the youth group is this large, hundreds of kids, but it was stale. It was dry. There was no spirit. It was kind of a social club. And I don't want to waste my time with that stuff. I want to see the move of God. And here's the thing is that kids are dying for a life worth living. And they are desperate for a God who's real and active and moving. And so we just slowly started introducing prayer. Simple prayers, encounters with God, openness to God. And all of these kids just kind of opened their lives to it. And it became not weird, it became a norm. And it got to the point where if we ended youth group without a time of prayer, even middle school kids would be upset.
Wow.
Like insane, out of control, well, maybe controlled chaos in middle school ministry. Those middle school kids even were like, we didn't end going up to get prayed for, or praying for each other, or like, what was the deal? And so it just became a staple for our middle school kids, for our high school kids, even our college students. It was like, if we don't have fun, if we aren't getting teaching where it like kind of makes me think, and if we're not encountering God, what are we doing, right? And so, then we started training kids to pray for their friends. So they would end youth group up front. Their friends would come, lines of kids to get prayed for by their peers. And then our church was like, hey, can we get in on this? And I was like, this is what I've been waiting for. So we started having our kids joining our adult prayer teams. Wow. So Sunday mornings, people are lining up to get prayed for at the end of the service, and kids are there. And how I originally saw this was I was at a church, this Alpha church in London, and I went down front, and a 15-year-old kid prayed for me, and it was so impactful for me that I walked away going, why are we not doing this as a church? Not just a youth group, but a church. And it's vital that kids, that their identity, how they see themselves, and their lot in life, their role in the world is a part of being a multi-generational group of people being salt and light together in the world. So this gives faith longevity in the lives of kids. And so I'm excited to be a part of what God is doing here at the Bridge.
Yeah. Well, hey, awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching this. And we hope that you've been encouraged and able just to get to know Brock a little bit. So please be praying for the Morgan family as they literally journey across the country and move and everything that comes with that, which can be a lot. So please be praying for them, and we cannot wait for them to be here. And so we're so excited. So have a great week, everyone. Grace and peace to you. We'll see you next Sunday.